Your stack is only as good as the accuracy of the data that is flowing through it. You can spend as much money as you want on great technology. A lot of these companies do a lot of great job marketing, the benefit of their technology. But at the end of the day, if you're working off stale data or a stagnant data that's not real time, I think sales teams are going to really struggle to take advantage. And sales ops and organizations are going to struggle to build credibility with their sellers that are looking, to be productive in an environment that's very challenging right now.
I'm Devin Reed.
And I'm Sheena Badani.
And you're watching Reveal, the Revenue Intelligence podcast powered by Gong.
Keep watching here to see the full interview. Or if you like to listen to podcasts on the go, check out the links in the description below.
And if you like what you hear, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Or all of them. Why not? And while you're there, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We personally read every single one, and I think I speak for both of us when I say they mean the world to us.
Could not agree more, Devin. Now, without further ado, here's the episode you've been waiting for.
All right, James, thank you for joining us on Reveal. Now, I don't want to add any pressure, but you are the third LinkedIn person to join us. So LinkedIn has the banner for most speakers on Reveal, and you're following in some great footsteps with Dan Shapiro and Lake Adoshi. So we're happy to have you. And I don't want to compare you early, but that might be happening.
Awesome. No, great to hear. That's good company to keep. I'm honored.
That is true.
Absolutely. And we know it's end of year, so we're extra grateful for your time here. I know you got probably deals in the background, so we really appreciate it. The thing that we wanted to talk about with you is how the sales tech stack is changing. So before we even dive into all the good stuff, maybe we just start really high level. Like we all hear tech stack, right? It's thrown around all the time. How do you, James, actually define what the sales tech stack is?
Yeah, I think depending on who you ask, you may get a few different answers. I mean, the way I think about tech stack in the most, simple form is it's really a set of platforms and tools that sales orgs use to do their job effectively. That's my definition.
Nice and crisp. I like it. And what are the core components that belong in every sales tech stack?
Yeah, I think it's been evolving over the years. When I think of the core foundations of a tech stack, or at least maybe today's modern tech stack, I think there are probably about 5 different components, I would say. Some that are, probably pretty common, people are probably pretty familiar with, but every stack today, you have your foundational CRM, which is your system of record, vital part of how sales organizations kind of manage and forecast and execute their strategies. Those are often a pretty big hub of other software integrations, but that's one of the core components. I'd say the second is reporting and analytics. So these are like your Tableaus and Power BIs. Many companies are relying more and more on data accuracy. So this sort of BI really allows you to pull in information from multiple sources and convert it into insights, typically used for sales operations, but other functions as well. And then third, I would say sales intelligence. So that's a category I'm very excited about and, LinkedIn's really excited about, but that's really about, empowering salespeople and organizations with information and knowledge to kind of go out and find and acquire new opportunities or grow existing opportunities with existing customers. And I think the difference between the analytics, and intelligence, what I'm describing in this third one is really, it's typically, external sources, I would say that are, very actionable. So examples are like Sales Navigator with LinkedIn or DataFox, DMB. And then the fourth would be marketing automation. That could, that could probably be a category on its own. We could probably spend an hour just talking about that. But as more companies really think about sales and marketing alignment or orchestration, marketing automation plays a really big role in today's modern stack. And you also see some of these companies, like acquiring marketing automation companies like Oracle, and Eloqua, and really kind of, lots of interesting integrations there. And then the fifth, I would say, is sales engagement, which is, all about, this era of automation that we're coming out of, which is about, prospecting at scale, outreach at scale, text, email, other communication channels. So I'd say those 5 to me are kind of what make up the core stack today. You actually have a separate category of enablement, where, there's a lot of training and interesting technologies that have emerged as well. And I guess that would be an honorable mention if I was to, put one more in there. But I think those first five are what I think about as the core.
And I suspect like that stack looked different maybe when you first started your career, and it's different today. And in another 5-10 years, it's going to look like something else. So if you take a look at today in the now, what are some of the trends that are impacting what tools, what systems sales orgs rely on?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've been in I go back to the phone book era of the tech stack.
I didn't want to date you, so I'll let you do it yourself.
That's a good way to put it, though.
But I would say, I think one of the biggest changes has just been the proliferation of technology that exists. I know many, many years ago, there were a couple core, key legacy players, your Salesforces, Microsoft, Oracles of the world. And, we've just seen an explosion of different technologies that are out there in the market today. So I think that in itself has been a pretty big trend. There's just sales orgs have so many tools that they're trying to manage and maintain. Many not working together, some starting to integrate and talk to each other. And I think the explosion of technology in the market is definitely one of the broader macro trends. But I'd say there are probably a couple others that, we're keeping an eye on that I think are very relevant today. First is just privacy and data, so there's a number of different legislations that are in place, some that are coming that I think are putting a lot of pressure on a number of the vendors and just the market, in general. And I think that's going to continue to be a growing trend as we think about the evolution of the stack. And then second, I would say is, you see a lot of companies trying to kind of expand their scope that maybe started in one part, of the stack that I described, that are really trying to, through acquisition, offer, more capabilities as a one-stop shop. And then, I'd say, sales enablement, the other one that I mentioned, I think is a real growing category where, companies continue to focus on productivity and efficiency. There's certainly a trend of, organizations actively investing in those types of technologies to improve their operations.
I mean, being in this space, in the sales kind of tech market, it's exciting to see that investment that's going into this space. It's exciting to see like new vendors pop up and the problems that they're going after. But then on the flip side, it could be overwhelming for sales teams, for buyers, that there are all these new solutions. How do they even work together? Which one is most critical? Which one can I leave behind? And then the other piece of it is the explosion of data. Now there's so much information, and generally reps are not even they're not taught what to do with that information and data. So I'm curious if you have any recommendations for orgs who are expanding and they have all these new tools and systems and data. How do you set your teams up for success to use all of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the biggest challenges, regardless of what technologies you're using, is the accuracy. Your stack is only as good as the accuracy of the data that is flowing through it. So I think, one of the biggest, trust gaps between sellers, and, their leadership or their organization is, that the data isn't quality or it's not trusted. And I think, one of the things that, has been really interesting over the past year is that there's been so much uncertainty and so much change out there in the market that, that's starting to be compounded because there's so much movement going on with buyers and, changes in organizations. So I think the companies that are investing in technology really need to think deeply about, are the foundational tools they're pulling in providing trusted, and accurate, sources of data that are keeping up with, the pace of change that's happening out there in the market. And I think really, thinking thoughtfully about the data sources that you're pulling into the stack, is where it really starts, because you could spend as much money as you want on great technology. A lot of these companies do a lot of great job marketing, the benefit of their technology. But at the end of the day, if you're working off stale data or stagnant data that's not real time, I think sales teams are going to really struggle to take advantage, and sales ops and organizations are going to struggle to build credibility with their sellers that are looking, to be productive in an environment that's very challenging right now.
Well, speaking of like changing markets or all the change that we're used to in sales, there's the great resignation happening, right?
Yes,
Which means a
right.
lot of B2B buyers are turning over, leaving the company and going somewhere else. So how is that trend impacting the way that we're selling, or maybe your team is selling today, James?
Yeah, it's something we've been spending a lot of time on here at LinkedIn. I mean, we obviously have a pretty unique lens on, talent movement across all industries, and we have the unique luxury of, having 800 million, users across the globe of our flagship app on LinkedIn. And that gives us a pretty unique lens into, buyer seller behavior and buyer seller interactions. And, when you start to look at things like the quit rate or the amount of turnover that we're seeing, within the context of B2B, the B2B buyer demographics, so senior decision makers that are often on a buying committee or, strong influencers, in the buyer circle, it's incredible. And it's something we haven't seen something like this, at least in my time in 12 years at LinkedIn, and maybe in our lifetime. I think the stat I saw most recently was that we saw, a 31% year over year increase in B2B buyer turnover, and I think that trend's only going to continue. So, and if actually some of our research also shows that 80% of sellers said that they lost or had a delayed deal in the past year because their champion switched jobs. So, yeah, it's pretty incredible. And, I experienced that. I run global accounts, here at LinkedIn, and, we're seeing the same thing. You're late in your sales process, and all of a sudden your executive sponsor, decided to go jump to another company. And it really has started to put the emphasis on a few different things. One, the competency and the skills to be able to multi-thread, and really understand how to do that well. So you're kind of shoring up multiple, relationships to mitigate the risk of talent movement on the buyer side. And then also making sure, coming back to my point that I really want to stress here, that the signals that you're using in your technology stack are actually living and breathing in real time that can keep up with this movement, because it's not just about understanding that, a buyer may have moved, but it's also about the opportunity that you have. When a buyer moves, they go somewhere else. So that may be another one of your company's accounts, your sales team's accounts. So if you had a great relationship with them at one company, being able to understand, that signal in a really efficient way so that you can, either mitigate the risk, or leverage that movement, for other accounts, has been really critical. So I think sellers just have a new opportunity in this environment to, to mitigate, risk in these unprecedented times, but also with the right tools, leverage technology to continue to help them be really productive and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine you and your team probably use LinkedIn to help with that. I could be wrong, but is there any ways like that your tech stack helps with this specific challenge, right? Like I know multi-threading is kind of the solution to it in a way, but I'm curious just from you of how you kind of like maybe operationalized, your team based on this trend.
Yeah, we definitely drink our own champagne, we like to say at LinkedIn. So I think, really spending time being sellers being much more intentional in their approach. We hear the term buyer intent quite a bit now. And I think we've moved from an era of, we're coming out of the era of automation. When you think about, just, the prospecting motion for new business, or even in your existing customer business, a lot of the proliferation of tools that we're talking about allowed sellers to automate their outreach at scale. That's been going on for a number of years. Well, that's not good enough in this environment. I think, folks who are just relying on some of those tools alone, especially with static data sources, are really going to miss the mark, because the bar has raised in this virtual selling environment where buyers expect much more, and they have a much higher bar when it comes to their time and, responding back. If you look at the data, the volume of outreach through these types of tools has gone up dramatically, but the actual conversion rate of that outreach, into meetings and calls has gone down. And I think that's because when you're just automating your outreach at scale, you're not relevant. So I think the teams that will win are the ones that are going to really get focused on understanding intent signals to be able to reach out to the right buyer with the right message for the right sale at the right time. And in order to do that, you need to move beyond just static data sources and automation to intent. And like LinkedIn's a really incredible, living, breathing network where, people are updating, their profiles and updates and, billions and billions of signals in real time every day as an example, of, a tool that can be used to really, stay up on what's happening and making sure that your outreach is relevant.
So earlier we talked about like those 5 key categories for any sales tech stack. On the flip side, what aspects of the sales tech stack do you think folks should consider cutting or consolidating or just reevaluating because it's outdated or excessive?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would go back to, some of the trends that I mentioned around, privacy, and GDPR and compliance. I think the industry is going to face a lot of pressure, over the next couple of years from the regulatory bodies. So if I was a CIO or an SVP of sales operations thinking about investing for the future, I'd really want to make sure that the tools that I'm investing in are going to sustain, and support my organization over a multi-year journey. And I think you're going to see a consolidation, in the market where some players are going to survive, some aren't. There's going to be more M&A activity. And I would just, really stress to make sure that, the data sources that you're, putting in as a foundation, for your sales technology stack are ones that you're going to be able to trust, where the data is coming from, and, you're going to be able to, invest in a technology that's going to be with you for many, many years to come. Because I think, there's certainly a storm coming when it comes to privacy and GDPR and et cetera. So I would be looking at, any technology that, looks more short term. I'd be questioning whether or not that should be in your stack as you think about some of those trends.
We both have the.
I'm not going to name any names, by the way, but I would just say that to me is a very important factor to be considering when you're building for the future, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to put these technologies in, and then as the market evolves or the regulatory environment evolves, all of a sudden you have to rip them out a couple of years later.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's a great call and great ad, James. I was going to say we both have the privilege of selling to sales leaders, revenue leaders. That's who's listening right now. Sometimes, selling Gong, you hear, my tech stack. How big is my tech stack supposed to be, Devin? Right? Like, how many things am I supposed to add? And other phrasing is like, it can be bloated. And that's not to say, people don't still onboard Gong, obviously, in LinkedIn and add to it. But I'm kind of curious is like, how can, revenue leaders, sales ops, or, kind of the CRO personas, how can they kind of take inventory of their current tech stack, right, as we kind of head into the new year and maybe look to shed some things? Maybe it's consolidation, maybe it's, some of the regulation things you just mentioned. But how do you, James, kind of coach, revenue leaders who maybe are evaluating LinkedIn or just in general to kind of make sure that they have that lean tech stack that's helping them with their, most strategic priorities?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a perfect answer here, but I would say, starting with, the user, maybe like people and process, is the right place to start. Who will be using these technologies? What do they do on a daily basis, to, nurture relationships and close deals? And, how can you really augment those activities? And then from a process perspective, like where are the integrations? I've heard the term, I work with some of our largest global customers on the Sales Navigator and LinkedIn Sales Insights side. And, we often hear, this concept of a single pane of glass. We know the productivity loss when you have reps jumping from screen to screen because systems aren't integrated. So I'd really be thinking about your productivity tools and your sales and marketing orchestration, and are you working with a few core players across those 5 parts of the stack that I described, where you can really work towards an integrated approach, to make sure that you're not burdening your sellers with a whole bunch of different pieces of technology that aren't talking to each other in your stack. So and I think it's going to be different, for, many different customers when you actually get into their own proprietary systems and, the nuances and challenges that they're trying to work through and solve. But, all these companies, should be working towards having a CRM, reporting and analytics, sales intelligence, and marketing automation that is integrated, that ultimately, is a one-stop shop for your sellers to focus on clients and relationships and be productive doing that.
A lot of the examples you gave, and I think naturally when we think about sales tech, it's really empowering the individual reps to be more productive or effective or accurate, et cetera. But how do you see the data and insights that come from these solutions really empowering sales leadership? And if you have personal examples on that, that would be great too.
Yeah, I would say that we could talk about sales leadership, and I think it's probably pretty similar to reps. I mean, there are different, reporting and analytics, so you're looking in aggregate at trends and insights, that you can make decisions on as it relates to, where you've got productivity gaps or, efficiencies in your sales process. But I think one of the bigger things that I would advise to folks that are evaluating these technologies is starting to think about putting the customer or the buyer, at the center of this conversation. So, when you're assessing, these sort of technologies, does it make it easier, to communicate? Like, does it make it easier for your sellers to sell, but also for your buyers to buy? Does it help, your sellers, more efficiently, leverage data, to be able to provide reliable buyer insights? Can you extract more value, from each interaction with a client through these technologies? And, it's been very one-sided. Like, we're always thinking about, sales and productivity and, efficiency and conversion rate. And it's all, how is this helping sellers? But I think if we focus also on some of these buyer first principles, how does your technology enable your sellers to bring more value through every interaction to your buyers, especially in this fast changing, environment? I think, that will lead you to, ultimately some of the right solutions and the right outcomes that we're all driving for. So I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of punted on the, sales leadership, because I actually don't think it's too different than, the broader sales side. But I do think what we're not talking about enough is how these technologies actually help make a better experience for buyers as well. And I would just like stress again, I think like, you have your leaders in the market where, we've been at this for 10 plus years in sales solutions, this concept of social selling here at LinkedIn, but we came through this era the past, 5-10 years on automation with this proliferation of technology that I discussed, and it's like, it's all about automating. It's all about outreach at scale. And, let's, bring in the AI and just automate. I'm a firm believer that we're moving into a new era where that's not enough. And in fact, the brand of your sales team as it relates to how buyers perceive you could be, damaged if you're relying solely on automation and not thinking enough about intent and insights and value, and making sure that outreach experience is a really positive one, from a buyer perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point, and I like how you reposition the question and then rephrase that so that we really think about that in our evaluation, right? Like, what is the customer's experience with this technology? How are we making the process better and the experience better for them? So I think that's really amazing.
So, James, we ask all of our guests the same question to wrap up our conversation, and that is, how would you describe sales in one word?
How would I describe sales in one word? Oh, that's a good one. I would say critical.
I don't think we've
Love
heard
it.
that one, actually. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think sales is, it's really the profit engine for every organization. So when you think of, any company's mission or vision, the things that they're trying to accomplish, the good they're trying to do in the world, sales is really the profit engine that allows all of those other incredible, parts of a business to actually thrive and do what they do and bring products and markets and services and broader impact to the world. And I think oftentimes it gets overlooked, but I think it's just critical to any organization's success relative to what they're trying to accomplish, in that bigger picture.
Love it.
I like it. Well, James, thank you again for hanging out with us. We always appreciate it. And of course, sharing your tech stack wisdom and insights. So, best of luck closing out the year. We're rooting for you. And I just want to say thanks again. Thank you again.
Thank you both. Really appreciate the opportunity.